Welcome to another episode of the Ambitious Legacy Podcast. I'm your host, Sabine the Purpose Lawyer. Thank you for listening, and thank you for helping me be on purpose. So today we're going to talk about trust versus prenup. I've been getting this question a lot lately. Should I get a trust? Should I get a prenup? Well, a trust is not a prenup, and a prenup is not a trust. A trust will not save you from your spiteful, angry ex if that situation should happen. Hopefully that is not your story, but you should know that there may be a reason why you want to have both, right? So let's look at it this way. You found the love of your life. You decided that you want to get married. Everything is beautiful. Then COVID happens and you get locked up in the house for a year. You gotten married already. So now you're like, I can't stand you. You can't stand me. We're ending this, right? So the trust, your parents actually created for you a trust. They did everything that I tell you guys about here, and they listened, they set up the trust. So the way that the trust is set up, it's for you and your sibling, your brother, and you get income distributions from this trust. You know, your parents have passed on, God rest their souls, and you get income distributions every month from this trust, and so does your sibling, but you don't actually own the assets from the trust, right? They are locked up in the trust, they're safeguarded, and that way it's not actually yours. And so the trust also says that after your life, then your children will receive the benefits of this trust. So, of course, your angry soon-to-be ex-spouse's attorney is like, no, you have all this money locked up in the trust. We're going after that trust. You know, my client relied on the assets, the income that you were getting from that trust. So we want the trust assets, right? And your attorney's like, nope, it's a trust. It's a irrevocable trust now. It's protected. So what you should know, though, is that even though these assets are in the trust, the courts are still going to look at what is the character of these assets. How was this trust actually created? They want to know who created the trust. So if it was you that created the trust, now you would have less protections because you would have more control over this trust, right? And the courts would have to want to allow the other side to go after these assets. But since your parents, your lovely parents, did you this service and they created this trust for you, that gives you greater protection, right? So the courts are going to say, well, you know what? They didn't create this trust, and so they don't have as much control over this trust as one would think. Second thing they're going to want to look at is, well, who are the beneficiaries of this trust? Is this trust just for you? Are you the one who's inheriting all of this funds? Or is it, is someone else relying on these funds? So because you also have a sibling now, your sibling is also going to be relying on these assets. So the trust is going to say, the court is going to say, well, all of these trust assets do not belong to this person. So we cannot just treat it like a piggy bank and, allow access to these trust funds. Right? And so they also going to want to know, do you actually own the assets in the trust? And we already said, no, you don't. However, what is happening is that you are getting income distributions from this trust. So the income that you're getting from the trust can be counted as your assets, right? So your spouse now comes after and says, well, I want alimony because you have all this extra money that you're getting from the trust. So I want it counted towards the alimony. And that may be something that actually happens, right? That could actually happen where your trust assets get counted in your estate. So this is where a prenup comes in, right? So although they're not the same things, they offer different protections and they can kind of work together. So now, had you signed a prenuptial agreement prior to getting married, even though things were great and emotions were flying and Cupid was swirling around with hearts and everything, if you would have taken the time to have a serious conversation about your assets, make sure that each other is fully aware of what assets that you each own, right? Because a prenup is good. It protects. What a prenup actually does, it's a contract between you and your spouse or your soon-to-be spouse, that pretty much states that you're going to leave with what you came in and I'm going to leave with what I came with. And so, or there could be other sort of arrangements, right? But what it does, it kind of draws a line in the sand, says who owns what and what are our intentions for this relationship. Sometimes it could be, we're together a certain number of years, you get to, we share a bit more of the pie, or, if we have children and things like that. It could be designed in many different ways. But as long as you guys are on the same page, typically you want to be represented by attorneys to make sure that actually contract is strong and that the courts will rely on it. And you want to definitely disclose everything. And this is the part where people get hung up. They don't want to have the conversation, number one. And two, they don't want to disclose all of the assets that they have. Because if you leave something out of that disclosure when you're creating a prenuptial agreement, then those assets can be counted as part of the marriage, right? So don't get slick, don't hide assets. So now with the prenup, coupled with the trust that has your assets separate, and the prenup says, well, hey, I'm getting all this income from this trust every single month. Or if the scenario was different and you're actually getting assets from the trust, or you're getting expecting an inheritance, I'm getting all this income, all this stuff that's going to come my way. I want to make sure that it remains my separate property and not part of the divorce, right? So because of the fact that you were so in love at the time, you didn't sign the prenup, now this spouse is going to get part of those income distributions as alimony or spousal support because of the fact that, we didn't want to have that hard conversation. So the question is, should I have a prenup? Should I have a trust? Well, you really want to consider having both because it adds that layer of protection. I always tell you guys, you want to layer on the protection because, it really makes sense to just think about things and what are the goals of yourself, your marriage, your relationship, your future, your kids, if you have kids. And so you want to think about laying on that protection. And so during the midst of a divorce, the courts are going to basically look at, did you commingle these assets? Did you put each other's assets together in one account? Was, your spouse relying on the benefits of the assets that you already had? Another big thing is, and a lot of people who invest in real estate should know this, if your spouse contributed to improving the real estate or, maybe managing the real estate and helping with anything that sort of either furthered the growth of that asset, then that asset is going to be included within the marriage. So that's what I talk about when I say the court's discretion, because they could even look at that, right? They could even look at, did this person contribute to you being in a better position? And that's why a trust may not be enough for this. And sometimes maybe even though a prenup is great and is definitely necessary and needs to be added, you still want to follow those sort of guidelines, right? To say, okay, if I really want this to be considered mine, then I really have to keep it separate. And obviously we don't want to enter into relationships where we're thinking about, well, how are we gonna make sure that mine is mine and yours is yours? But at the same time, divorce rates are extremely high. They've always, for as long as I can remember, they've been above 60%. And so that's not even 50-50, right? So it's a challenge in making a marriage work. I'll just say that. It's a challenge in making a marriage work. So, there's a good chance, unfortunately, that things could fall apart, and you want to make sure that you kind of layer on these different areas of protection. And that's all that I have for you guys today. So if you're madly in love with the person you're in right now, I know it feels good, but if it falls apart, don't say I didn't give you some protections. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.